The spirit of the Ukrainian army is incredibly high. They're fighting for their homes. The Russian morale is poor. They're not fighting their homes. They're fighting on a lie. If Putin wins in Ukraine, then it's us next. He's a serial killer, and he will come for us next. Ukraine is fighting our war for us. Ukraine is reminding us that free speech does not come free. He actually might end up poisoning himself, which is an ending worthy of Shakespeare.
What's the outlook looking like in Ukraine and for the Russian military in particular over the next few months?
I'm going back there at the end of this month, and I've written a book about it, Killer in the Kremlin, which is both about Putin, but also it starts 7,000 words, which is my experience of the Battle of Kyiv. Now what's happened is October the 10th, there's a kind of swarm attack, like some awful fucking 80s video game. Ukrainian air defense couldn't knock out all of the missiles and all the drones it sent. 4 got through to Kyiv, killed 19 people, including a doctor who looks after kids with cancer, and her father been killed. So this little girl is an orphan. And they punched a cruise missile into this busy road crossing that killed the doctor and others, and a children's playground, and put a big hole, and I've got a picture of me inside the crater, and then and a big office block, smashing up a whole bunch of flats opposite. So this was evil. The Ukrainian army, I know because I hang out with them. One of my mates, this guy called Vladimir, he arrested me on day 2 of the war because he thought I was a Russian spy. Do I look like a Russian spy? I shouted at him. Never argue with a Ukrainian with a loaded machine gun. Anyway, we became pals, and I've been to the war with him at Bakhmut, and the spirit of the Ukrainian army is incredibly high. They're fighting for their homes. The logistics are good and getting better because the Americans in particular are sending them the heavy metal they need. Not enough, but they're sending them enough. And thirdly, the leadership in Ukraine is good. The Russian morale is poor. They're not fighting their homes. They're fighting on a lie. The Ukrainians in that sense, it's nonsense. Number 2, the logistics are getting worse. Number 3, the leadership is bad, both in terms of incompetent and morally evil. So in the long run, I think the Ukrainians will win. How long is that long run? It's grim because at the moment they've hit 40% of Ukrainian electricity generation, means the lights are going out across the country. If you switch the lights out, you switch the power off, you switch off water and sewage too. And so great big cities become unlivable then. And that is, I think, part of Putin's game plan. However, his draft isn't working well, and more Russian soldiers are getting angry. They're not being paid the money they were promised, they haven't got the kit they're promised, and they're dying in big numbers. And I'm an optimist. Call me a fool, Oli, call me a fool, but I'm an optimist. And I think that the Ukrainian fighting spirit and the West's superiority in money and heavy metal will win out, but we mustn't lose our attention on this, because if Putin wins in Ukraine, then it's us next. He's a serial killer, and he will come for us next. Ukraine is fighting our war for us. Ukraine is reminding us that free speech does not come free, that democracy must be defended. These are serious lessons, and people in the West have forgotten it. So I hope and pray Ukraine are going to win. I'm becoming worried, for example, the Americans, they're voting for the Republicans, and at least some of the Republican Party think that's enough support for Ukraine. Are you fucking joking? Do you understand who Vladimir Putin is? Do you understand what he's been doing? We've got to help them. As I say, I'm an optimist, and I'm going back there. One of my friends from school, I'm sure he won't mind, he's got cancer, and it's inoperable. And I'm going to go and see him. And I said, but by the way, mate, I'm going to Ukraine at the end of this month. So actually, I might die before you do. Should we have a bet on it? And by the way, I can't wait to go to the Buena Vista and tell my Ukrainian mates that story, because it's kind of why you're fighting the war. So the thing about hanging out in Kyiv is it's like hanging out in, it's like the stories I read about London in 1940. That this, all you want to do, anybody who's in the RAF or in the Royal Navy, or my dad was in the Merchant Navy in the Battle Atlantic, all you want to do is go dancing and drink beer. But there's this monster, and we've got to kill the monster. And then, and only then, can we really, really party and drink beer and all that. And if we can't do it, at least we're doing it so our kids can. And we've kind of forgotten that. And what's exciting and beautiful and brilliant is what the Ukrainians, their spirit, their fight, their love of life. It's right and it's kind of beautiful. So I hope that Russia wakes up and destroys this zombie czar who's ruling them. I hope so.
If that happens, right, if, let's say there's significant military failure for Russia in Ukraine, or let's say Russia does rise up and deals with Putin, maybe I'm answering my own question there, but what is the mechanism for that happening? What is the Russian or the Kremlin equivalent of the 1922 committee? Like, how does Putin go?
In my book I think about it, and I think it's a general who's got pissed off with losing so many men, because, how many tanks are there in an army? Is there 1,000 tanks? Well, no, there's only 400, because 600 are being converted into villas in the south of France. There'll be some honest generals who'll be very angry with what's happening. So maybe somebody pops out a gun and shoots him, an honourable general. That's what the Germans tried to do, von Stauffenberg tried to do. Or a doctor. Putin goes in for surgery. There's something wrong with him. When I met him in 2014, for the BBC, I doorstepped him about the shooting down of MH17. He looked like a weasel or a space alien. His face was thin. He had Botox, but his face was thin. And then now he looks like a hamster. His cheeks stuffed with straw. So physically, there's a difference. So there's something wrong with him. As a friend of mine, Ashley Grossman, professor of neuroendocrinology at Oxford University, it's a title so fancy I can't even fucking spell it. But he says, I think he's got cancer of the lymphatic system. And I said, Ash, would you put a 5 on that? And he said, no, I'll put 50. So he goes under the knife, and then the doctor makes sure he doesn't come up again. And I'm pretty sure the CIA don't kill people, but if they find that doctor, they'll give him a nice home in Beverly Hills for life, kind of thing. That's how they would work it. Or an oligarch who's pissed off because they've been stealing for 30 years from the great Russian public, or the not so great Russian public, and then suddenly their life's work is in an ash can, it's dust, and that's Putin's fault. And those people know how to poison people, they know how to kill people. And so if I'm one of them, I'd be thinking about getting rid of him. It's a classic thing, a guy called Accius said this, who said about a Roman tyrant, let them hate so long as they fear. For the moment, the fear outweighs the hate. I hope that will change. I like the idea that Putin is overdosed on steroids. This is Ashley's working hypothesis. And that he actually might end up poisoning himself, which is an ending worthy of Shakespeare. Fortune, turn thy wheel.
John Sweeney, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me. I really appreciate it.
Cheers.